It's the oldest image in human history. Every time you look at a art history book or just human anything depictions, the artwork in the caves, that's the first art. The hunt of the bull, chasing the bull down, or the bull killing the man, those are the oldest images. And I chose the bull and the hunt, bullfighting theme, because I knew it would resonate with the world. The city of Monterrey in Mexico has a big culture. They probably have the most dominant culture in the world. My father told me stories about him being a kid and selling peanuts at 8 years old just so he could get in for free in the bullfights and experience that. So at a young age, he took me to the bullfighting ring, and that was where I saw death for the first time. As a kid, you're there crying and you're like emotionally developing yourself. As soon as the second bull comes out, you forget about that and you grow out of that fear. And by the time you walk out of the arena after seeing 6 bulls, you're a different person. The aspect of the bull being so universal, I knew it was going to be a hit.
Yeah, so I'm an artist, clearly. That is my primary function in this universe, is being an artist, but I'm also the curator of public art for the Houston Airport System. So I direct and oversee one of the largest public art collections in the state of Texas and one of the largest public art collections in the aviation industry. The Menil Museum is a very revered space in Houston, Texas. After many years of being involved with the Museum of Fine Arts and the Contemporary Arts Museum and St. Thomas University, and other institutions created their own art institution, the Menil Collection, which is one of the most treasured spaces in Houston, Texas. Uriel and I collaborated on a work of art as well. As artists, we brand ourselves as artists. We brand an object, whether it's a canvas or a clump of clay that we shape into something, we brand that as art, and thereby we change the value, the history, the pedigree. We change all of the perceived notions around that. One day Uriel came to me and said, I have an idea for a piece of art and I want you to brand me as a work of art. We created a performance art piece that was very ritualistic and spiritual in nature. It was a super stormy night. We were in this huge studio out in Splendora, Texas, a 12,000 square foot art space with a tin roof and no insulation, and the rain was pounding on the ceiling, and it was just this roaring thunderstorm outside. And we had someone come in and evoke air by burning sage and kind of cleanse the space. I did an earth sculpture on the ground and did a stencil of the word art on the ground with sand. We had someone come in with water and watered aloe vera plant. And then Uriel walks in with the fire, lights the fire, heats the torch. The branding occurred. Then we took a leaf of the aloe vera and soothed the burn with the aloe vera to conclude the performance.
Well, Uriel was my 4th grade student. He was very bright, very inquisitive. I don't know that he loved sitting down and listening to his reading lessons or doing his reading lessons, but he was so curious. He was also great. He was in this program called Academic Decathlon. A very rigorous program. I mean, you have to be great at chemistry, at math, at physics, at memorizing literature. You have to be able to give oratory. There's these 10 different events. That's why it's called the Academic Decathlon. And he was a standout, and he was on the first Academic Decathlon team ever. And his curious mind, his inquisitiveness, his approach to everything, learning to him was always easy, because if something is interesting, it's easy to know more about. And to him, everything was fascinating. Everything was interesting. Uriel, he was way more than just a student. So when I taught Uriel, that was my last year as a public school teacher, because it was also the year that I was taking this little program I had started within the school district called Idea Academy, and I was creating its own standalone school. So as I was building this little organization, I had big plans for it, but in order for us to be able to grow and expand, I knew that we were going to need to raise a lot of money. And I don't mean raise money like through bake sales, like we were gonna have to raise tens of millions of dollars. I also knew that what people were going to invest in was our students. And what they were really going to invest in was the stories that our students could tell. So Uriel had this very special place on campus. Every time we were bringing philanthropic foundations or high net worth individuals to the school, he was always part of the plan. And he would tell his, I thought, very compelling personal story about where he came from. And you know, he did this when he was in 5th grade and 6th grade and 7th grade. We had the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation came down, and they sent their representatives, and we had a request into them. I forget how much it was, 5 million, 6 million, I don't remember. But Uriel was one of the students who helped seal the deal. You know, he talked about growing up in the Rio Grande Valley, talked about what it was like having Spanish as his first language, talked about how the fact is that his parents, very smart, didn't have formal education that went past high school, and that he wanted to be the first in his family to do something different. And just the way that he could convey his dreams for the future, his hopes for the future, it really connected with people. Well, when I found out what Uriel did, I mean, obviously, I just had a flood of emotions. I was angry that he would do it. I was worried for him. I was fearful for what his family was going to have to go through. Just, you know, I have to say, not once in the beginning did I feel this emotion of like, you know, empathy, or curiosity, or inquisitiveness. When I talked to Uriel, I didn't say, why did you do this? You know, tell me what you were thinking. Like, I'm sure I said, what the fuck were you thinking? It wasn't even that it was like disbelief. When I saw the video and I recognized him and his figure right away, I thought, yeah, this is something that Uriel would do.
A man walks into the Menil collection in Houston, right up to a Picasso painting, and vandalizes it with spray paint.
There are some new developments in the case of that Picasso that was defaced at a Houston museum. The incident was caught on tape, and now police have identified the suspect.
Las autoridades pintó un graffiti sobre un cuadro del pintor Pablo Picasso en un museo de Texas. Como nos dice Lourdes del Río, la escena fue grabada con un celular.
Search is on for the vandal who covered one of Pablo Picasso's masterpieces in spray paint and got away, even though the whole crime was captured on cell phone video.
So you want to know why I did it, right? Well, in order to really understand that, we first have to go back to where I was in that moment of my life. My senior year at the University of Houston was really when my life began to be manifested. I remember that's the year when you're about to graduate, and what are you gonna do as soon as you graduate? Do you already have a job in line? And for me, it was being an art teacher. That was the goal. But at this moment in my life was when I began to see things. Life was speaking to me. The universe was speaking to me at that moment, and I realized that wasn't my career path. That wasn't my destiny. That's not what I wanted to do with my life. One morning, after painting all night, I remember one of the painting professors walking into class, and he was in a terrible mood, and I remember he slammed the door and he walks into class, and the first thing he said, "Have you ever been to a museum and been like, what the fuck is this? I can make something better than this." And those specific words just changed my life. I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be this frustrated professor. Look at him, he fucking hates his life. He really wants to be a full-time artist, and live in his art career. But here he is, confined in the classroom. There was this moment where he was stuck in the matrix already. And I realized that that's not what I wanted in my life. I left the classroom that day just with my mind completely fucked up. I was like, okay, Uriel, you need to really step your fucking game up right now. This is a moment of truth, right? When I think of bullfighting, and I think of that moment where the young bullfighter goes to the stage and really proves himself to the arena, that he's worthy of being a bullfighter. It was that moment for me in art school. It was all right, Uriel, are you really gonna be an artist, or is this just are you just going through the charades and graduate, here's a fucking degree in art, and then you end up complying with society and you don't do shit with your life. It was that moment for me. That's when I started to give no value to painting trains and painting the streets and risking my life on top of bridges. I gave no value to that anymore. And to me, it was done. It was part of the old world. And now it was this moment where 2012 was an intense year. Some people thought that was the end of the world, right? And there's so many protests that year, and the people were beginning to find out about the NSA, Edward Snowden, Julian Schnabel, right? People didn't understand that you could be tracked through the internet. It was a moment of enlightenment. To me, it was just obvious. There's this Picasso there, no glass. If I can paint a bridge that is 6-7 stories high, hanging while cars are driving under me and risking if I can do that, I can easily paint this thing. It was a joke. But the problem was, how are we gonna get through it? The guards, the security system. That was the real challenge. That was the artistic plot behind it, right? That was the performance behind the action. That was the art. A friend of mine taught me about the 5-paragraph order, which is this strategic military book that is used and implemented before an invasion. And we used this strategy on the museum, basically, to unlock its security system in every aspect. Everyone had a copy of the museum's blueprint, and everybody understood everybody else's role. And I remember we reviewed each other's maps, and we just had to memorize them. John knew that he had to keep the door open. And right before he kept the door open, there's this desk attendant, and his job was basically to distract the attendant. And when he got the cue, the hand signal from another person across the room, he knew that the action was about to happen. So while he was distracting the attendant in the front, he was gonna stop talking to her, about the pamphlet. And then as soon as he got the cue, he was gonna pretend to leave, without leaving, just with the door open, still asking questions. Somebody's job was to simply distract the guards with questions. There were several camera members involved, and we also knew that the cameras in the museum were involved, so they were recording as well.
We understood that there was going to be at least 25 guards inside the building and also in rotation, so they don't stay in one room. They're constantly moving like a chain. There's also security guards outside the museum patrolling in vehicles. You see, the Menil is not just one building. The Menil is this neighborhood. But the painting was in the main building. I mean, they have a multi-million-dollar system. As soon as I walked into the museum, it felt like a rugby play. It felt like if I needed to tackle someone, if I needed to run over someone, it was gonna get done. But it was so easy. Everything was in motion. It was like a domino effect. It only took about 3 seconds to really like paint the Picasso. And I remember specifically that when I put the stencil, I wanted it to land exactly where the eye is of the painting. And as I sprayed it and ripped off the stencil, I can remember the sound it made, like a whip, like a whapa. And I looked at it from the side of my eye and I saw the shine of the gold, fresh paint as I walked away. And now all I needed to do was walk out of the building. The story finally hit the news. And I remember seeing the YouTube video going from 300 views to like 300,000 views in a lapse of a few hours. I knew we had to get out of the States. You know, the story was blowing up. So I told my friend, take me to the studio. I need to get all the paintings that I can that fit in the car, and we need to get out of the city. It was time to get out of Houston. I remember when we were in the car, he had National Public Radio on, and they cut the song and they interrupted by saying Picasso painting vandalized and graffiti over Picasso, and this thing was blowing up. As we were going to Corpus, I remember I asked my friend for his phone, and as he gave me his phone, I grabbed mine as well and I threw him out the window. I felt like I was beginning to get tracked, and I couldn't risk anything. When I got to Corpus, I couldn't contact my friend because I didn't have a phone, so I was laying there right in front of the Whataburger #1, and this stranger walked by. It was this girl, and she asked me if I was okay. I guess she saw that I was concerned or there was something wrong with me, and I told her that I needed to make a call, and I had misplaced my phone. I called my friend, and my friend showed up in this white car, and he opens the back door and tells me, get the fuck in, I already know what you did. I remember he showed me his laptop, and he had his Yahoo account open, and it had the top 5 stories. And the first one was, LeBron James wins his first championship. You know? And the second one was, graffiti over a Picasso. My friend asked me, how can I help? What can I do to help you? And all I can think of is to keep moving. I asked him to buy me some bus tickets because I didn't want to go into the building and be filmed by the cameras. So he bought me some bus tickets, and from Corpus I went to Harlingen. From Harlingen I bought another ticket and I went straight to Monterrey.
Uriel Landeros has been on the run for 5 months. Recently, we learned that he was hiding out here in Monterrey, Mexico. Now, despite being a wanted man, he agreed to talk to us. That's because he says he wants to set the record straight.
This painting, you know, like, it doesn't matter. It's just a piece of cloth.
After defacing a 1929 Picasso painting at the Menil collection in June, Uriel Landeros vanished and has remained silent until now.
Who would think that a little image of a bullfighter killing a bull would lead to all this? I don't regret anything that I've done.
Landeros says he's not apologetic for spray painting a stenciled image of a bull, a matador, and the Spanish word Conquista, which means conquest, onto Picasso's woman in a red armchair.
What do you say to the people who say that this is a 15-minute fame thing for you? Like, what do you say to those people?
I mean, I really don't give a about the 15-minute fame. I don't think they'll catch me. I think if I turn myself in, that's how they're gonna get to see my face.
And I would get these updates from him. You know, he was on the run, and I'm like, Uriel, what's going on? And he would say, I'm on the run with 2 beautiful girls, and every night's a different adventure. It's just the 3 of us. And I'm like, I don't even want to know like anything else behind that story. And I talked to him a couple of weeks later. Uriel, what's going on? I'm by myself. I'm really scared. I'm out of money. I don't know what to do. So I mean, it was just this. You know what? He's 20 years old, 21 years old, somewhere in that range. You know, he's in Mexico. He's on the run. He's notorious. You know, he's got some family in Mexico, but you know, he really was on his own.
I began to get paranoid because I knew that the government understood I was in Mexico. And now even their strategy was changing because now they had to extradite me. And I was still getting phone calls and emails and messages. And I got a call from Carlos Palacios, the curator of Carrillo Gil. And even when he called me, I didn't trust him. I thought he was working with the police. Here's this guy from the most elite institution calling me, saying that he wants to exhibit the stencil that I used to paint the Picasso painting. It was unbelievable. And he tells me, Uriel, just think about this. This is a very important moment in your life. I'm gonna call you in 3 days and hopefully you change your mind. And you hung up the phone. Sure enough, 3 days later, I get his call again, and I had researched him by then. And I could tell from his history and his profiles and the art shows he had organized in the past, I could tell he was real. So I decided to risk it. He wanted the stencil from me. That's what he really wanted. And to me, at that moment, that was like the Mona Lisa. That was like the object that had the energy of conquering the Picasso. So he explained to me that he was gonna send me some paperwork, and it's basically a contract that says that if my artwork is damaged in any way, they were gonna pay me whatever the sum, a blank check basically. And as a joke, I wrote 21 million euros because that's how old I was at the moment. So I shipped the paperwork and the stencil to him. I FedExed it to Mexico City, and a week later, it was published by the museum and by the newspapers in Mexico City that I was about to have an exhibition with the Palace of Fine Arts now. I was about to become the youngest artist in Mexican history to have a museum show at the most elite art institution in Latin America. So think about it, now here I am, just painting Picasso, the government is looking for me, and now I'm about to have a museum exhibition in the most prestigious museum of all Latin America. They literally own Diego Rivera's and Frida Kahlo's, and Frida Kahlo's house and Diego Rivera's studio is literally on the same block of the museum. And then the name of the street was Revolucion. To me, even that was a sign of the universe. I remember seeing the name of the street, Revolucion, and I was laughing to myself. I felt like the Joker at that moment. The day before the museum exhibition in Mexico City, I had a moment to gather my thoughts. It was still very unreal. It felt like I was dreaming. It felt surreal that I was about to have a museum exhibition in conjunction of being on the run and being persecuted by the US government. As the bus is driving through the city, I remember seeing graffiti everywhere. Being in Mexico City, it was just overwhelming and challenging. And the vast amount of graffiti everywhere it was ridiculous. And now here I am, about to have a museum exhibition being welcomed by this monster of a culture city to have a museum show for graffiti. It was just the levels of irony and the levels of, it was just, I was living my life like a movie, really. That's what it was. I was living my life like carpe diem to the 10th power. I didn't even have time to catch up with my thoughts at the speed I was living my life. Even standing in front of the museum when I saw it for the first time and with a banner with my name on it, it just, I couldn't believe it. I started heading towards Carrillo Hill. I heard the noise of a crowd, and as I walked in, I saw about 500 people there celebrating, taking pictures, drinking, cheering, and it was the most surreal moment in my life. I was 21 years old. Here I am, having a museum exhibition. As soon as I walk in, the curator grabs me and he starts introducing me to all these strangers, and I remember taking a moment and just standing there and just seeing everything move as it was happening. It was that moment, it was that little peak, 1 minute where everybody's celebrating. Wow, I see my stencil on the wall now, being glorified by the most elite art institution in Mexico, hanging next to Diego Rivera's at that same level, 21 years old. That night was one to remember. I left with 2 girls who invited me to Cuernavaca that night. The next morning after the museum exhibit, I woke up in Cuernavaca. And as I was sobering up, the thoughts of my mother being harassed by the police came to my mind. It had been 6 months already that I was on the run, and this whole time, different government agencies and police forces were walking into my parents' house and kicking the doors in and bugging the property, and I can only imagine what my mother was going through. Those thoughts began to make me feel very guilty. That's how they got me.
No sabíamos de qué nos estaba hablando la policía. Cuando preguntaba y exigían que le dijéramos dónde estaba. Y me dijeron, señora, dije, es que no sé de qué me está hablando. Dijo, prenda su televisor, está en todos los canales. Fue un tiempo muy difícil porque nos quitaron la oportunidad de vivir como una familia normal. Interrumpieron nuestra intimidad. Me acuerdo que agarrábamos una libreta, mi esposo y yo nos sentábamos en nuestra cama y yo escribía y le decía a mi esposo lo preocupada que estaba y cómo me sentía, y luego le daba la libreta a mi esposo y luego mi esposo escribía y me contestaba cómo se sentía él. Y fue la forma en que empezamos a comunicar, porque no sentía que nos seguían por todas partes, sentía que nos escuchaban todo lo que hacíamos. A veces rompía yo las hojas y iba, las echaba al baño y las bajaba al baño. Los policías entraron y nos separaron a mi esposo y a mí. Metieron a mi esposo a un cuarto y a mí me agarraron para otra parte. Nos separaron y nos empezaron a interrogar y a decir dónde estaba, dónde estaba. Si ustedes lo están escondiendo, van a ir a la cárcel por encubrirlo. Y le decíamos, es que no sabemos dónde está. Y nos ponían más presión. Mis hijas estaban pequeñas. Estaban atemorizadas porque la casa estaba llena de policías, adentro y afuera. Después nos sacaron para afuera y empezaron a registrar en los cuartos. Nos seguían diciendo que si no decíamos dónde estaban, nos iban a llevar a la cárcel y nuestras hijas se iban a quedar solas. Una de mis cuñadas también nos compartió que enfrente de su casa estaba la policía también, y estaban vigilando su casa y habían ido a tocar y preguntar por mi hijo. Y yo decía, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Por qué tanto acoso, tanta presión de parte de las autoridades? Mi hijo hizo esa acción y a lo mejor no estuvo nada bien, pero no era un asesino, no era un violador. Fue un tiempo muy difícil. Había mucho dolor en mi corazón porque en realidad no sabíamos dónde estaba.
I sent my mother a few letters while I was on the run. One of them specifically had a message where I knew she'd understand that I was okay. I would never sign these letters with my name. I remember I specifically wrote in one of them, El Niño Perdido en el Templo, which is a biblical reference to when Mary lost Jesus and found him in the temple of the wise men. My mother would burn these letters so that there would be no evidence of our communication. My parents didn't even speak in their own home because they were afraid of being heard and listened to and recorded. I can only imagine what she was going through. I knew I had broken her heart. The last place I was at before I decided to turn myself in was in Guatemala. I remember I was in this little village. It was all surrounded by jungle, and I was standing in this little rock and I was just thinking to myself, Uriel, what's next, Uriel? You've been published in every single newspaper in the world. You just had this museum exhibition. It's time to face the music. So I contacted one of my family members and we hired a lawyer.
When Uriel turned himself in, somehow I got in touch with his attorney. His attorney was a public defender. Talking with her, one, I knew that he was going to have somebody who really cared about him, but I'm also thinking, this woman, this public defender, I mean, she is going up against, the government, a wealthy museum with even wealthier patrons. I mean, she's got to take on the whole power structure of Houston. And I just, I was talking with her and I said, what's going to happen after he was convicted? And she said, well, he's going to go to prison he's going to go to prison for a long time. And all I could think about was, if this were some white frat boy who had done this on a dare or some sort of hazing initiation, there probably would have been alums of the fraternity who would just have bailed him out the same day. And secondly, it would have been a slap on the wrist, and it would have been this cocktail party story that he and his fraternity brothers had told for the rest of their lives. But, you know, I knew that wasn't the case. His last name is Landeros, not Smith. He's from the Rio Grande Valley on the border, not some wealthy suburb. And like, not just that, you know, even if he had been like a lighter skinned Latino, and if maybe he would have talked just a little bit more eloquently and smoother, and he didn't sound like he was from the north side of Donna, things would have been easier. But I just knew that this judge and this jury were just going to take one look at him, and they weren't going to know anything about the story that he had told the Gates Foundation or that he had told Laura Arnold. They were just going to judge a book by its cover, and he was not going to get the benefit of the doubt. And you know, all of the jurors and the judges and everybody in the legal system that weren't looking at this young man and saying, oh, this could be my son. They were looking at this young man from the border and saying, oh man, this kid's a thug. Like, we need to send a message. And you know, sure enough, he ended up getting the same sort of, you know, he got a stiffer penalty than rapists and violent criminals get. And not only that, but because his case was so high profile, he was this like, there was a certain term for it. He was like this prisoner of interest, and they treated him special because they didn't want him to get hurt. But what that really meant is that he was in solitary confinement, and he spent months and months in solitary confinement. And I can't say I was shocked, but I was disgusted that a non-violent offender would be treated so harshly by the American justice system.
As far as I know, Uriel did not have a criminal record, and he jumped into the world of crime with both feet. You know, he was all over the news, and people were going to be watching, and so I was afraid they were going to try to make an example of him. Any other person would have been offered probation, but the problem with probation is there's the concept of restitution, and you can't really put a price on a Picasso. And so even if he took 10 years probation, there's no way he was ever going to make it financially, and he'd end up in prison.
The first offering was 10 years. They offered me 10 years for graffiti. It was ridiculous, you know? Not even like some of the most heinous crimes get 10 years.
You know, it costs a lot of money to the county to extradite people. I mean, we're talking, this was a global affair. You know, never in my life did I think I was going to be negotiating with U.S. Marshals the surrender of my client who fled and taunted and posted. People that get sentenced to 2 years in prison never serve the full 2 years. At the most, normally they'll get paroled out at about 8 months. Or normally they'll get paroled right out of Harris County depending on how much credit they have. But the DA's office made it their mission to make sure that Uriel served every single day of those 2 years. If he got 10 years and they were going to protest his parole, we wouldn't even be sitting here together right now. He'd still be in there.
I went from being in a Tier 1 university environment with young kids and inspiring geniuses to this world of murderers and the most heinous criminals in the state. And it was such a drastic turn of worlds. It was a colliding of worlds, and I really didn't have anybody to talk to in there. I was almost glad that I was in segregation. And the reason I was in segregation was because I was considered a flight risk. They put me in a box for 2 years, and all I would do is draw and read every day. So by the time I got out, I could draw anything that I wanted. I served every day of my 2-year sentence. And when I got out, I had access to supplies. I was limitless. If I had been able to survive that, But couldn't I survive now? Even going back to art school and finishing that last little semester, I remember walking into that building and the empowerment I felt, the way the professors talked to me. I wasn't that same person. I was Conquista.
I understood exactly what he did from the beginning, you know? I had no problem with it. And then, like, it's like 1,000 other motherfucking more Picassos. Chill the fuck out. People put so much value on, like, material shit, it means nothing. You could burn that shit and then what?
A 12-year-old kid was shot in Cleveland, Ohio. We got the KKK working for the 5-0. Every day is a fight for our survival. How much longer will you see through the media blindfold? Squeezing your eyes closed. 43 on the roll. Students in government knapsacks, Beverly kidnapped. No sign they coming back, we are under attack. They murdered JFK, MLK, and Malcolm X for supporting blacks and minorities. What are the priorities? Stop destroying these families, increasing our insanity. How can it be we lost all track of things? Blasphemy emerged through the tragedy. Create a fucking masterpiece in memory of deceased. Conquer industries, executive, Congress, judicial trinities.
The image of war is more powerful than any bullet and any bomb, you know? And when people unite, nobody can stop them. No government can stop any people who are united. And slowly we're uniting, and I see it, you know?
The world is my habitat, so it's up to me to leave a legacy. Bones wrapped up in flesh is all you'll ever be. Hip-hop, state of mind, additive and pedigree, surrounded by negative and positive energy. Cops getting away with murder by police brutality. Others are getting away by bleeding insanity. The youth in the ghetto are usually the casualties. Pedal to the metal, heading for major catastrophe. You can't replicate the formula to my alchemy. The mic and spray can is an extension of the anatomy. Worldwide attention with the message on a masterpiece. Washed as a matador, slay the golden beast. A tsunami of blood will eventually flood the nation, putting us in hostile situation with no explanation. Force feeding us, choking on regurgitation. We could all agree the world needs saving.